All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about different approaches to graphing your data from the jumping lab using Excel. I'll start with some more straightforward graphs, but then also talk about some more nuanced ways to look at the data. So let's start by sharing the screen with Excel on it. All right, so again, make sure you're opening up your data within the Excel program itself and not looking at it from a web browser or something. So here we have all the data. There's another video where Tina is showing you ways where you can select different columns and then letting Excel figure out how to graph them. I'm going to show you how to construct your graph from scratch, in which case you need to select some cell that is not adjacent to your data. So if you are in the data or right next to the data, Excel would make assumptions about what you're trying to graph and then make a graph for you. So we want the cell away from all the data selected, and then I can go into insert, and we're going to use a scatter plot. I'm going to insert a scatter plot to kind of scatter without any connections between the dots. And if you look what shows up here, it looks just like a box because we haven't told it anything yet about the data. So the next thing we need to do is select the data. There's different ways you can go about it. Up at the top here, if you've got your chart design menu, you can just hit select data. Or if you just put your mouse in the chart area and you do the right click, the option select data, either way. Select data, I get my little dialog here. And series are basically the collections of X and Y data that you are going to actually display as the dots of your graph. For a simple graph, there's just going to be one series. So we'll just do that right now, but then I'll show you how you can actually show more than one thing on the exact same graph by using multiple series. So let's start. Let's say we're going to compare a person's height to their jump height. So we can go into add, we're adding a series. We don't even have to really give it a name because there's only one group. We know what we're doing. So the X values here are going to be people's heights. And remember, because the independent variable goes on the X. So I can just click on this little arrow thing here. You can see it here. And now everything I select is going to be the data for my x-axis. So I'm going to select all of the heights. Here I'm going. It's important that you get exactly the cells that you're trying. If you accidentally get a label in there, for instance, it's going to totally choke. Or if you don't select everything, if it doesn't match your Y values, things are going to choke. So I'm making sure I'm going exactly from the first height to the last height, and then I'm just hitting enter. And then I can also do this kind of, double check. It says I'm going from C2 to C79. C2, that is the first height. C79, that's the last height. All right, that makes sense. So now my Y values are going to be the jump heights for those exact same subjects. So I'm going to hit the little arrow thing here for Y values. And just going to select all the Y values. And hit enter. And they're there. And again, I can double check F2 to F79. That's what it should be. If things get weird here, sometimes if you accidentally type something in here, you can just delete all of this and start from scratch. All right, so that's what I want. I have my X values are their heights, Y values are their jump heights. I'm gonna hit OK, OK. And then if you look here, all the data is kind of squished over on the side. I want to spread it out so I can look for trend lines and all that. So the data doesn't actually start until about 1:45. So what I can do Again, there's lots of ways to do this. I can either go into my like chart format, or I can go in, what is it, chart? If I just move my mouse down here, I click on the x-axis and say format axis. And I'm going to say the minimum of my x, let's make it 145. Now the data is spread out and it's filling up the whole chart. That's what I want. I want to make sure my axes have titles. Lots of different ways. Again, for the top, that's just a chart title. This could just be versus for my y-axis, again, I can add a chart element, axes titles, primary vertical. I'm going to call it jump height, and always gotta have the units there in centimeters. Right, I can go add chart element, axis title, primary horizontal. And this is going to be just the person's height. This is also in centimeters. So there I have my graph. I want to see if there's a trend. I can just select the points themselves. You just click on any of them. You know that they're selected if a bunch of random ones look like they're selected like that, kind of get highlighted. Again, I tend to use my right click on my mouse to get my context sensitive menus. So I'm going to hover over the selected data. I'm going to do my right click, add a trend line. We're going to do a linear trend line, and that, actually I can put my R value there. Kind of tells us how close it is or how good a fit it is. So I've got that going now. And if I want to know what that trend line is, I can go into add chart element, legend, put it on the right, just say, so I know that dot is the linear best fit for this series of dots. So there I have a graph showing people's height versus their jump height. And it looks like a pretty strong positive correlation. And you could just stop there and say, oh, it looks like height is positively correlated with jump height. What I'm going to do now, though, is kind of go deeper into this data. And we're also going to look at height versus jump height. But we're going to, instead of just looking at everybody and putting everybody on the same graph like this, let's look at males versus females and look at height versus jump height for the males and for the females and see what comes out. And I think you'll be kind of surprised. So to do this, I'm going to leave this graph here. I could print this. In fact, I will want to print this out and put it in my lab notebook and incorporate this into my discussion. What I'm going to do now, though, is copy all this data. I'm just copying it. I'm going to say copy. I'm going to go onto a next sheet, and I'm just going to paste it here in this next sheet. The reason I am doing this is I am going to start rearranging the data, resorting it. If you resort the data and it's connected to a graph, the graph's going to get all cattywampus because the graph is based on cell numbers. And if you start moving the data, like what data is in which cell, it's going to mess up your graph. So I want to have my data here. I have it on this sheet 2. I can resort the data. I'm going to sort it by men and women, and it's not going to affect my previous work here that I did here on this first sheet. So here's my sheet. If I want to sort it by sex, it's actually pretty simple. You just select the data. You want to make sure you select all the data. If you just sort by a column, you can actually reorder a single column, but not reorder the other columns, in which case you start disconnecting all the data from itself and it's a mess. So make sure you have all the data selected. Go into this data menu here at the top, data, go into sort, there's a sort menu, and you can go in here, sort by sex. Okay. Now, if you take a look, all the females are clustered together, all the males are clustered together. This is going to make it easy to easily select the heights or jumps just from the men or just from the women. And what I'm going to do is do a graph again of height versus jump height, but we are going to separate it out by men and women. So we'll start the same way we did the last graph. I'm going to select some cell that's not connected to any of this. I am going to go to insert scatter plot. So here I got my scatter plot. And now I'm going to select data, again, the same way I did. Out here, I'm just right-clicking, select data, and I'm going to add series. But now I am going to give the series a name because I'm going to have dots that are just for the women and just for the men. So this is going to be women. And the x values again is the height, but it's just going to be for the data points that are the women. So up to number 58 here. And the y values, the actual jumps, are also going to be the same ones. Again, I do my little sanity check here. C2 to C58, F2 to F58, that looks great. I hit OK. Now I'm going to add another series. My next series is going to be called men. And the x values are going to be the height, but just the heights of the men. And y values are going to be the jumps, but just the jumps of the men. Again, I can double check. C59 to C79, F59 to F79, that looks good. Okay, okay. And there we got them. Again, all the data is shoved over on the right here. So I'm gonna right click on this axis and I'm gonna format the axis and say, start at 145, spread it out. I need to label my axes, add chart element, axis title. Horizontal is gonna be height in centimeters. My y-axis is going to be jump height, centimeters. And now I actually want to add a legend to the right. And this will now show me, oh, the women are the blue dots, the men are the reddish dots. And what I can do here is do a trend line, but instead of for everybody like we did last time, I'm going to do a trend line. I'm going to select the series that are just the women. I'm going to right click, add a trend line. I'm going to select the men, right click, add a trend line. And if you take a look what happens here, still the same data, but we have a really different story here. If you look at jump versus height for men, there's really no correlation, it's flat. If you look at, again, height versus jump for women, no correlation, it's just flat. Again, but when we were looking at everybody all at once, it looked like, oh, you know, taller the person, the higher the jump. You know, when we look at the data this way, it's still the taller the person, the higher jump in general, but it seems basically it's more like women tend to be shorter and women jump less high, and men tend to be taller and men tend to have higher jumps. So it seems to be more about men versus women being height, having different heights and also different jumps rather than the overall height being related to jump. So it's, you know, you get a very different story from looking at the data this way. Other things we can do. I can take my data here and let's say I just wanted to get the average height for women and the average height for guys. And I'm just gonna select all this data again. I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna go put it on another sheet. What I can do here, I'm gonna make myself a little chart on the side here. Average, so this will be average jump. This is gonna be for men, for women, and for average jump, I'm just gonna insert a function. I can go up to this F here. That's one way to do it. If you click on F, insert function, in fact, average is the first one here, or you could search for it. Average, okay. And it's just gonna be the men, so I'm gonna select all of the jumps just from the men. Ka-ching. There it is. For women, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna insert this function, average. I'm gonna grab all of the jumps, but just for the women. Ka-ching. So there I have it. And in general, making bar charts, it actually is nice to just let Excel figure out how to make it pretty. So I'm going to select my data here, and I'm going to go into Insert. In this case, I'm doing a bar chart here, and ka-ching. And there it's all set up pretty for you. Again, you want to label your axes. I'm going to add a primary vertical axis. This is going to be, average jump in centimeters. And there we got it. So this would be a way to, and again, it's important that the men and women are sorted here in order to make it easy to get this average. So there you have a couple of ways to go about. If you wanted to sort your data by BMI, that would be another thing that probably some of you are going to want to do. Let me just show that briefly. If I copy my data here, and let's go into yet another sheet and paste it here. Paste. And now I'm going to go into data. I'm going to filter. Not filter, I'm going to sort. I'm going to turn off. Wow. All right, let me undo. I didn't mean filter, I meant sort. Now I'm going to sort by BMI though, instead of by sex. So BMI. Ka-ching. So now I have smallest BMI at the top, all the way down to the largest BMI down here at the bottom. And this is nice if I, for instance, wanted to look at the calf, let's say I wanted to have the average jump of just healthy BMI people versus unhealthy BMI. I could do that the same way I just did it for men versus women. I could say, it's going to be average jump. This is going to be healthy BMI. Healthy BMI. Again, my average jump, I'll insert the function for average. Healthy BMI, I'm going to get the jumps of everybody from 18 to 24.9, right? That's the healthy range. It's between 18 and less than 25. There I go. Unhealthy BMI, it's going to be anyone less than 18 or above, or 25 and above. So this is also going to be insert. I'm going to do insert function, average. And now I'm going to get this jump here of this person who's got the low BMI, and then hit control and also add in all of the people with the BMIs that are above 25. So here we can see it's F2 and then F55 through F79. Okay, So there I have healthy BMI versus unhealthy BMI. In this case, I could do insert a bar chart again. And there I go. And here we actually see, on average, it doesn't necessarily look like the unhealthy BMI jumped less than the healthy BMI. Again, we'd always want to add our axes with the units. So for primary vertical axis, it's going to be average jump in centimeters. So it's another thing you could do. If you wanted to graph do a scatter plot of just calf, calf versus jump, but just for the people with healthy BMI, this would be, you'd have to do this pre-sorting. And then I could do, insert a scatter plot. Let's do a scatter plot. And then I could say, let me put it back on the screen. Let's see, there we go. I'm gonna, select data, add some data. My X values, if I'm gonna do calf versus jump, they're gonna be calf, but it only picked the calves of the people who had healthy BMI. So down to this subject here on row 54. And the Y values are gonna be the jumps for those exact same people. So for all the jumps for those same people there. And again, I want to do my check. D3 to D54, F3 through F54, that matches up. So I could say, okay. And again, I get my data here. It's all clustered. So let's format my axis here, and let's start at a minimum of like 30. So then I've got a graph here of, again, if I want to put my labels on there, which I do, I could say primary x-axis is circumference in centimeters, and my add chart element axis title y-axis is going to be jump centimeters. So there you got it. Your chart title might be circumference versus jump for subjects with healthy BMI, something like that. And then you could also do, select and get a trend line and see what you can see. So just kind of putting this all out there. These are ways you probably want to start using to dig into the data and see what kind of story it has to tell. Obviously, the first thing you're going to do is examine the data, evaluate it to see if it supports your hypotheses or not. But beyond that, you should also, even if your hypothesis wasn't looking at height or calf circumference or weight or something, you should look at each of those and other things that kind of come into your mind as well that you think might be interesting. A lot of times what the data has to say isn't necessarily what you originally thought it might be saying. So you want to look beyond your original hypothesis to see if there's any interesting stories there, including ones that maybe weren't things you were thinking about originally. And then again, you print out all the relevant graphs, and then you would integrate them into your discussion and talk about what you found and what the data seems to say about the relationship between these variety of body measurements we took and a person's ability to jump vertically. All righty then.